Here we go. Ready, Rich?
Hey, what are we doing? Which one's this?
We're doing topic number 1 is OpenAI releases Operator.
Got it.
We'll bring people up to speed on it, talk a little bit about it, and then how business can leverage it. Call it a day.
A hard 15.
Oh, a hard, solid, rock hard 15. Let's go.
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the man who turned Sarasota into Silicon Valley, Rich Swire. How's it going today, bud?
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, you know, I feel like you as a recurring guest on my podcast has been nothing but hits. So we just got to keep it going.
This is great.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that we're going to talk a little bit about, some big moves in big tech. Recently, OpenAI released Operator as kind of the newest, family of products that's going out there. And I know a lot of listeners are maybe not up to speed on, the model releases maybe, but then when new real kind of game-changing features come out, I think they're playing a lot of catch-up. So I figured today we could do kind of a short episode, jump right into what Operator is, and maybe give a high-level view of that, and then some ways that businesses can look to leverage it as it kind of stabilizes or as it finds a product-market fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about Operator, and again, it shows kind of the diversity of how OpenAI is thinking about different use cases for their AI models. And what they ended up doing was they ended up kind of using both their vision API and AI, where it can actually, look at images and make certain judgment calls. And then obviously their core model from a reasoning and an LLM. And they kind of combined that and created this agent that can essentially surf the web, basically, right? So the idea is that within the OpenAI ChatGPT application, you load up the Operator. Obviously, you have to upgrade your account to have access to it. But essentially what will happen is when you actually use the Operator, it'll load inside of the ChatGPT application, it'll load a embedded browser experience. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting take on it. Other companies like Windows and Microsoft and others have kind of looked at it more as a desktop takeover, which, kind of has its own concerns. And I thought OpenAI's approach is somewhat is very interesting in the sense that it essentially loads up an embedded browser. So that way, you can have a little bit more of it feels more embedded in the application, less like, oh man, this is a potential security issue if it sees everything, so it's only watching what you want it to watch, right? So essentially the use case is, let's say I want to order some food on Uber Eats. I can prompt it just like I do ChatGPT, and Operator will load up UberEats.com. And just as if you were to go through and click on certain things, find a restaurant, put your zip code in, choose your meal and hit order, essentially the Operator will kind of do all those tasks. Now it does have the ability for, in certain cases, you might have to do a takeover, right? Kind of take over the experience and enter in information, for example.
Yeah, grab the steering wheel a little bit.
Yeah, so like it gets to a point where maybe it gets stuck on something, or there's an option that it's not understanding, so you'd have to get in there and do a little takeover and then let it resume. And obviously in most cases, like people are probably more comfortable with approving or actually clicking the submit buy here button that engages the credit card information and lets it rip. But I'm sure Operator could do that for you as well if you're logged on to your account. So I think the idea here is, even though I think the examples they use, like shopping for food or shopping for tickets at a concert, or going on Amazon and finding the best price computer, something like that, those are some classic examples they show. There's probably more there's more interesting ramifications when it comes to kind of what I would call general browsing, where you're actually not going to use an app per se, but you're actually trying to do maybe some really, really well thought through investigative research. A lot of times, and of course the use cases are various use cases depending on what you do for a living and also what you do personally. But like, I can imagine, for me, like if I'm doing some, let's say, research about a specific technology or a specific company for that matter, I can literally direct Operator and say, hey, I need to learn more about this business. And of course, there's information about this business all over the web. It's not just at their website, but it's on LinkedIn, it's on Crunchbase. So you could literally direct operator, and behind the scenes, while you're kind of toggle over and do your own, do your work, it can go and gather all these information in disparate areas on the website, on the web, and then bring it back, summarize it, categorize it, and do all the things you need to do. So I actually see a lot more lift with that than I do with maybe saving. I don't even know. It's so easy. Apps are so easy to use these days. It's like click, click, and I'm done. I don't know how much operator is going to give a lift, but it is a cool demo to show, right? Because it's something that people use every day, right?
Yeah. The product market fit, we talked about this a handful of episodes ago. I think, when this kind of overseer in other softwares was kind of becoming a potential talk track. I obviously back then was not necessarily bought in on like what could be used. And I definitely see where, you're coming from with like the demos. It's funny to me that like the demos are strictly from what I've seen as well, like consumable. So it's like, well, don't you wish you didn't have to do all that pesky consuming on your own?
Yeah,
let
right.
AI do that for you. And you're just like, oh yeah. So it is interesting. I do think another kind of secondary piece to this that maybe it's me conspiracy theorying a little bit here, but the fact that they're trying to create a browser experience instead of OpenAI is starting to go towards that potential thought point of we want to own the user journey a little bit more too. Like if you get comfortable playing with OpenAI and ChatGPT, and now you're comfortable browsing inside of ChatGPT, can we just have you operate every aspect within ChatGPT at some point, right? And then, I mean, that to me is kind of a reason for Operator to be there. It might not be as consumer centric or focused as the original GPT push was, because I do think businesses can leverage this, but seeing that a lot of their initial demos and use cases are around, here's how we can help you just do your daily stuff. Like that to me is kind of speaking to that app experience of simplifying a point A to point B that maybe just allows us to, as consumers, feel a better tie to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in previous episodes, I think we even predicted that ChatGPT was going to be looking at consuming the desktop experience, and they've talked about the mobile side.
Don't go fact check us, but I'm pretty sure we did it.
Yeah, episode 7.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I certainly think there's no reason for it to take over the browser at some point. I think they're just kind of holding that ace until they are ready to. This was part of it. I think this operator functionality opens the door to that 100%. Just to have a browser, just to have the ChatGPT experience alone is not enough to warrant. And then there's other really cool, I think, use cases to be seen. I don't know if it could be used today in this form, and maybe it can be, but outside of maybe the security compliance issues. But I'm certainly going to try to test it where using Operator to do unit testing or even documentation for software companies, right? Or even using it for internal software. Let's say you're going to, fill in a CRM system or something like that, or you have a lot of information or data, or you want to go into a spreadsheet or whatever. I could see how Operator could potentially grow into that as well, where it might have other use cases. Because obviously most of the things we talk about on the show are end user, consumer, maybe even a business user use cases. But when you think about really how AI is going to probably make the biggest dent is going to be more on the development side, on the creation side.
Yeah.
And, we've talked a little bit about the growth of coding when it regards to AI and how many tools out there now exist that leverage AI to do a lot of the coding. In fact, that's one of the biggest benchmarks they use on how well AI, is performing, is how well it codes and how well it can reproduce code. And I think this is an expansion of that, where you can imagine prompting an AI to build a piece of software, and then it generates the code, then launches an interface, and then uses something like Operator to then go through the user experience and for testing, testing it, seeing if there's any errors and issues, and then going back.
Yeah, an automated debug that just triggers on, runs what it needs to do, triggers off, sends you the report. And then if you go, oh yeah, can you actually go back and try this again now that I've changed it? Yep, it goes on, just does it. So that could be a really cool use case, especially on the dev side.
Yeah, there's all kinds of really cool things that you could, and a lot of it too is it's incorporating the visual element of it as well. So I think what's going to happen for a lot of websites too, and this happened, early 2000s when the mobile phone started to become popular. And now, over 50-60% of the internet traffic is on a mobile phone. So it forced everybody to reimagine their websites as mobile ready, certainly mobile friendly. And then now, almost every website or app is just an app, right? They don't even, you don't go to Uber Eats a lot on the browser. You can
Yeah.
obviously, but most of it is through the app. So a lot of companies started shifting their mindset to app first development. And then I think the operator is going to probably introduce specifications that developers will have to embrace to make it easier for operator to use their app. So I think there's going to be we're at the beginnings of a next phase of web development where if you're going to build a website or build an app or build a software company,
it's got to be operator ready.
Yeah, it's going to have to be operator friendly, just like you had to be mobile friendly.
Well, it's interesting too, because I know one of the big selling points of operator is the ability to kind of like execute multi-step tasks and integrate with APIs and all that. So to that exact same point, having operator kind of connect all of these different tools together and be able to take that chain of thought and like accomplish tasks that normally would be inside of one, maybe platform or service, and now do that and then move to the next piece and then move to the next piece. Like that is a very, I think, interesting way that businesses might be able to leverage it. Yes, the consumer absolutely will have like a personal assistant that can go, like you said, order food or like check on these emails or do these kind of things. But like having businesses now being able to use AI to link systems that maybe ultimately wouldn't normally link together through chain of commands and things like that. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it could. Right now it's mostly just, like single website use case where it's kind of, going and browsing the web and not programmatically doing anything, but I could totally see how it would evolve into that, where you could, programmatically go into a web interface. We used to call it screen scraping back in the day. So before APIs existed and you had like green screen applications, when we were building web applications back in the day, where we were trying to move from a thick client server app, like a client server app, to the web, we would write code that would grab the screen, and convert it into HTML. And that's a similar behavior that we're seeing now. It's basically, looking at the screen and looking at different options, and figuring out what's the best option to pick based on the prompt that I was given. Now, if you have played with Operator even just a little bit, you'll see almost immediately how it does. It's very easy for it to break right now. Again, and I honestly think it's not necessarily about Operator itself. It's also the fact that the websites that it goes to might have a very diverse and very overcomplicated navigation scheme. Even sites that are like Amazon, it's a lot of options when you think about Amazon when you're in there shopping. They've got checkboxes everywhere. They've got searches and scrolls and next pages and recommendations. So for an AI to kind of find its way through that might be somewhat more complicated than versus like a very simple checkout process of an e-commerce site. So I can imagine like companies like Shopify and other companies leveraging this new tool and basically saying, "Oh, we're operator ready," which would be basically telling the people who are looking at embracing AI and being able to be AI friendly in their shopping experience, might see that as a competitive advantage.
Even if it's not being used right now, it's just like, check out what we've done.
Exactly. No different than being mobile ready. I think, even though, mobile applications and mobile websites were not being hit as often until obviously people started to adopt and use the mobile phone more rapidly and more during the day than their desktop, but didn't stop people. But I think honestly, you could argue that a lot of the multi-billion-dollar companies that exist today are only multi-billion-dollar companies because they embraced mobile for their use case quicker than anybody else, right? You could argue, almost everybody, even somebody like Instagram, right, that came out of nowhere and threatened Facebook, was a mobile first, browsing experience. They never really cared about the web. And that was at the time, it was very crazy. You know, it was like, what? You're not going to have you don't really care about web, you just care about mobile. And then now Facebook's trying to turn into, trying to change everything on Facebook into Instagram. And lucky for them, they own both. But, they now understand that being mobile was a strategic and key. And I think Operator, even though it's an embedded browser and its biggest challenge is going to be how does it work on mobile, right? But let's just say they're going after like a desktop first mindset. It will, I think, drive companies to be operator friendly, and whatever that means. It might mean that just that they have to have a markup language embedded file that kind of guides the AI to what fields mean what, or
it's the blinking light or the red flash to be like, this is what you need.
Yeah, or just naming their fields, or just following. Honestly, probably just following best practices code. HTML markup language might be enough. It's just that not everybody does that. So it might give a lot of people a good reason to upgrade their web experience if they do believe that they will have AI eventually coming to their site to do activities. The opposite might be true too, where I'm guessing that at some point there might be a scenario where OpenAI has to abide by some sort of do not allow AI to access my website. So there's probably going to be some sort of like in the web browsing, in the search world, you can tell Google, through your website, you can say, hey, don't scrape my website. I don't want you to scrape my website. And you can do that through a text file that you include on your website. And they might do the same thing for AI, where they say, hey, I don't care. Don't let AI browse my site. I'm not sure what the reason for that would be. Maybe it's just, I don't want it to grab proprietary information, or I don't want it to bypass whatever. Who knows?
Yeah, but to a degree, I think we can agree that like you put that in there, and then Google or Sam Altman in this scenario are like, yeah, we won't.
Yeah.
And then like big old winky face.
Sure,
like
probably.
They're still doing it. But yeah, I do think it'll be interesting to see how Operator, as it kind of gets its sea legs, right, and it starts to do more, becomes a little bit more integrated, or gets a few more at bats with like consumers using it in certain ways. I don't think a general, even like AI advocate, someone just using ChatGPT daily, probably sees a use for Operator yet. But I do think this kind of announces their position a little bit more of just like, we are not just going to be an AI tool, like we are going to be an AI like product suite at some point.
Yeah,
it's going to have all these different models, all these different applications natively within our platform.
Yeah, what's interesting too, and this is a good point to make before we leave, is this is their entry into what they call the third phase of the agentic roadmap, right? Like this is their first AI agent. And by definition, an AI agent is when AI is doing something for you, right, autonomously. Even though you're guiding it through prompts, it's actually going out and doing an action, right? In this case, it's browsing, a website while you kind of oversee it. And it just shows you also the diversity of what an AI agent can be, right? So like with Rhea, what we do is we build AI agents that kind of live in the background autonomously, and then that kind of just run and do business roles like outbound sales or inbound support, or, building out blogs or doing SEO or whatever it might be, which is really like having an employee doing it. It's just that, just pretend that employee works from home and you never see them, but instead it's AI. This is more of like a human operated agent, but allowing the agent to kind of go off and do its own thing and come back. And that's very interesting, because I think what we're starting to see more and more with their models is that they're not getting simpler and faster. They're getting more complex and long, and they're taking longer to do what they need to do. In fact, you could argue that they're moving more toward, because of reasoning and because of these agentic approach, there might be a scenario where you say to this agent in Operator or in O3 or wherever, you say, hey, go do this task and come back to me when you're done. And it might take an hour or 2 hours. So I think that's actually where they're headed, versus, which is kind of the opposite of what we've been used to when it comes to the internet. Everything up until today has been faster, 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 right? Google's all about deliver results. And what we're seeing AI do is be much more, really with higher intent to try to find the best result. And what I love about it is twofold. One is that just shows another momentum away from advertising, which is great. I think the general momentum away from that instant gratification and monetizing clicks I am all for. I think that single-handedly ruined the internet because it just made everybody build around that user behavior, which is horrible. And that's why you have all these pop-ups and clickbaits, and literally even like, every day it gets worse. And then Operator even does it even more so by saying, hey, listen, if AI is doing the surfing, it's not going to click on ads. So this is another, people don't really see that
becomes a barren wasteland, at that point,
so
where it's
you don't
like,
really
I don't want to spend money here.
Like the danger underneath the water, right? You don't see the deepness of what's happening here. Is every day AI and the development of AI, whether it's OpenAI or others, is starting to pick away at that ad revenue, that ad-based approach to the internet, whether it be Facebook, Google's of the world, which are pretty much, they own 60-70% of the market, which is, I think, a really good direction. And I think it puts on notice, like, hey, at some point, if AI is doing most of the browsing, most of the work out there, kind of collecting this information, and then, of course, we have not seen yet, but it could potentially happen, but probably much more in a thoughtful way, that ChatGPT incorporates ads. I do think that it's going to be a better place. The internet will be a better place in 5 to 10 years, because we're going to move away from this, like, what I would call just a pollution of the web experience. So I'm excited to see that.
No, absolutely. And anyone that might listen that works for OpenAI, congrats on building your first AI agent. If you need some help with that, feel free to come over here to Rhea. We'll teach you how to do it. But for those listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which we linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor, Leah Rich on the mic.